Sometimes you think about those really big global issues, the ones that feel almost, well, too huge to really wrap your head around. Well, today we're tackling one just like that. We're diving into a pretty comprehensive analysis you shared, looking at the hypothetical but definitely serious idea of a conflict between China and the U.S.
Exactly. And just to be clear, this isn't about taking sides or, predicting the future or anything like that.
Right.
It's more about digging into this analysis to understand the potential ripples, the consequences, the strategies involved, the diplomacy, what that landscape might look like.
So the mission for this deep dive is basically to pull out the key takeaways, understand the big picture ramifications from this analysis without getting totally swamped in detail.
Precisely. Giving a clear view of what the analysis suggests are the major potential outcomes.
Okay, let's get into it then. The analysis starts by outlining some really severe consequences. Right away, it talks about a massive hit to the global economy. This isn't just a small blip we're discussing.
Oh, far from it, no. The analysis really hammers home the potential for just profound disruption to global trade. I mean, think about how incredibly intertwined the U.S. and Chinese economies actually are.
Yeah, the amount of stuff going back and forth.
Exactly. Goods, services, finance, it's immense. A conflict would basically be like throwing a giant wrench into those works. The analysis specifically flags the risk of widespread economic instability, possibly even a full-blown global recession.
Wow. And does the analysis pinpoint specific areas of the economy that would be particularly vulnerable?
It does. Finance, technology, and manufacturing are really highlighted as sectors likely to face, well, significant upheaval.
Okay.
Just imagine the complex supply chains behind all that, like microchips. A conflict could just sever those vital links.
Leading to shortages, price hikes, a global production slowdown.
Pretty much. The analysis suggests, for instance, that the complex path chips take across continents could just descend into chaos, stopping production of everything from phones to cars, potentially for a long time.
Which, naturally, hits everyday people very quickly. And the human cost. The analysis doesn't avoid that topic, does it? It mentions a potential humanitarian crisis.
No, it definitely addresses that. The potential for significant civilian casualties, large-scale displacement of people, massive damage to infrastructure. It's a major concern laid out in the analysis.
That's grim.
And what's particularly sobering is how the analysis considers advanced weaponry. Even the theoretical risk of nuclear fallout is mentioned, which would obviously just amplify any humanitarian crisis catastrophically.
A truly chilling thought.
Yeah.
And beyond the immediate human impact, there's also the environment. The analysis points to serious, long-lasting damage there, too.
That's right. Another critical piece. Potential harm to ecosystems, significant pollution, and again, that specter of nuclear contamination if things were to escalate to, well, an extreme.
These aren't short-term fixes either, are they?
No, the analysis suggests these could have lasting, devastating impacts on the planet's health.
So the stakes are just incredibly high. Okay. The analysis also gets into potential military strategies. It starts with naval power, historically a big U.S. strength.
Yeah, but what's interesting is how the analysis acknowledges China's rapidly growing naval capabilities. So while the U.S. might have an edge now,
it might not be so clear-cut in a conflict scenario.
Exactly. The analysis sketches out scenarios involving naval battles using really advanced tech. Think stealth ships, sophisticated anti-ship missiles on both sides.
So a high-tech, very dangerous fight at sea. Does the analysis suggest where China's advances might pose the biggest challenge to, say, established U.S. naval thinking?
It hints at the challenge posed by sheer numbers and specific capabilities, like those anti-ship missiles, potentially creating contested zones where carriers might be more vulnerable than historically assumed.
Okay, then there's cyber warfare. That feels like such a critical, almost invisible battleground these days.
Absolutely critical. And both nations have, incredibly advanced cyber capabilities. The analysis really stresses how these could be used.
To disrupt what? Power grids, financial systems.
Yes, exactly. Critical infrastructure like power, finance, communications, but also directly hitting military operations themselves. A strong cyber capability could be a massive advantage, maybe even decisive.
Imagine the chaos. Communications out, essential services down.
Right. It could cause widespread disruption very quickly.
And then even further out, the analysis talks about space, satellites. I don't always think about how much we rely on them day to day, let alone militarily.
That's exactly the point the analysis makes. Satellites are absolutely vital for communication, navigation like GPS, and of course, crucial surveillance and intelligence.
And both sides depend on them heavily.
Very heavily, which makes them potential targets. The analysis brings up anti-satellite attacks. While they'd be incredibly destabilizing, the idea is they could be used to essentially blind the other side, cripple their ability to see, navigate, communicate effectively.
Wow. So it's not just land, sea, air, but cyber and space too.
Yeah.
A truly multi-domain conflict, as they say.
That's the picture it paints, yes.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. The analysis also looks at diplomacy and international relations. It mentions global alliances, which seems like a huge factor.
Oh, absolutely huge. If you think about the wider world, a conflict like this wouldn't happen in a vacuum, right? Both the US and China have extensive networks of alliances, partnerships all over the globe. The real concern raised in the analysis is that these ties could drag other countries in.
Escalating it into something much bigger, even if those other countries aren't directly fighting.
Precisely. It could become a much broader global conflict very quickly.
So in that kind of situation, what about diplomacy? Does the analysis see a role for it?
It really underscores how vital diplomatic efforts would be. You know, organizations like the UN, the EU, other international groups, they could be crucial.
As forums for negotiation, trying to broker peace.
Exactly. Providing those channels for talks, trying to find off-ramps, de-escalate. It's a reminder that even facing potential conflict, diplomacy is absolutely essential.
The analysis also brings up economic sanctions. We see those used quite a bit. What's the take here?
Well, it explains sanctions could definitely be part of the toolkit, imposed by either side or maybe other nations reacting to the conflict.
To apply pressure, presumably.
Right, that's the usual aim. But the analysis also warns that sanctions could seriously worsen the economic fallout we already talked about.
And maybe have unintended consequences.
That's the risk. Potentially causing real humanitarian suffering in the targeted places, and maybe even destabilizing the global economy further. So the potential for a major economic downturn is significant. The analysis then considers the direct human impact, the humanitarian crisis potential. What's highlighted there?
Right. It mentioned the casualties, displacement, infrastructure damage, and the chilling aspect of advanced weapons, potentially even nuclear fallout.
Yes, those are the key elements it stresses.
So even actions that aren't direct military clashes, like sanctions, could have these really damaging, widespread effects. Okay, the analysis then does a deeper dive specifically on the economic implications. We touched on this, but let's look at the specifics it lays out. First, trade disruption.
Yeah, and what's insightful here is the detail. It's not just saying trade will be bad. It talks about shortages of essential goods, which means price increases for everyone worldwide.
Because so much flows between the US and China. Tech, manufactured goods, food.
Exactly. A conflict could severely restrict that flow, maybe stop it entirely. The analysis paints this picture where shipping lanes become dangerous, insurance costs go through the roof.
It's just a logistical nightmare, basically.
Leading to immediate, widespread shortages on store shelves globally. That's the kind of scenario it explores.
Okay. And currency fluctuations. That sounds abstract, but it has real effects, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The analysis sees significant currency swings as a very real possibility. The value of the US dollar, the Chinese yuan, big shifts there could ripple through the entire global financial system.
Affecting investments, loans, overall economic stability everywhere.
Precisely. A major source of instability.
And finally, on the economy. The vulnerabilities in global supply chains. We've seen hints of this recently, but this sounds like another level entirely.
It really does. The analysis details how a conflict could expose just how fragile these interconnected supply chains are.
Especially in certain sectors.
Yeah, it specifically calls out tech, automotive, pharmaceuticals, sectors that rely on complex international networks for everything from raw materials to finished products.
So severe shortages, major delays, impacting consumers, industries globally.
That's the potential impact it describes.
Okay, so putting this all together, the analysis seems to paint a very stark picture. A US-China conflict sounds like it would be catastrophic on multiple fronts. What's the main takeaway conclusion?
The overarching conclusion is pretty blunt. It would have far-reaching, overwhelmingly negative consequences.
Yeah.
It's not just about military losses or economic pain for the US and China.
It's wider than that.
Much wider. Significant human suffering, potentially on a massive scale. Global economic instability cascading everywhere. And potentially severe, long-lasting environmental damage. It's a grim outlook.
Given that potential outcome, what does the analysis suggest we should do? What are the recommendations to prevent this?
The recommendations really focus heavily on prevention. First and foremost, prioritizing international diplomacy, constant dialogue, negotiation, finding peaceful ways to resolve disagreements.
Keep talking, basically.
Essentially, yes. Keep those channels open and active. Second, it recommends actively building more economic cooperation and dialogue. The idea being that stronger economic ties, better mutual understanding can reduce the chances of conflict.
Makes sense. Interdependence is a stabilizing force.
Kind of, yeah. And finally, it stresses strengthening global governance, international institutions, arguing that these structures are crucial for managing cooperation and preventing conflicts on a global scale.
So the core message seems to be about robust international cooperation, open communication, and focusing on shared economic interests as key to keeping things stable.
That sums it up perfectly. The analysis really concludes by hammering home that belief. Strong cooperation, persistent diplomacy, and understanding our economic interconnectedness. Those are the cornerstones for preventing major conflicts and aiming for a more stable world.
Well, this has been sobering, definitely, but also incredibly insightful. A really valuable deep dive into what this analysis lays out. Thanks for walking us through it.
My pleasure. It's important to grapple with these complex, even hypothetical scenarios. Helps understand the real stakes in our interconnected world.
Absolutely. And for you, our listener, thinking about that deep interconnectedness of the global economy we've discussed, what unforeseen consequences might bubble up from a major power conflict that maybe weren't explicitly covered today? Definitely something to chew on, especially considering how crucial international cooperation seems to be in managing these kinds of risks.